Hello everyone, my name is Shannon Mullins, and tonight I will be sharing with you my presentation, which is The Life and Works of Emanuel Wallerstein. This is for Dr. Brooks' social theory class. Emanuel Wallerstein is one of our most important social theorists of our times. So tonight I will be covering a short biography of his life, a listing of his important works and his most important contributions to social theory, and then I will end with a reflection on his modern world system theory, which is actually his most important and most well-known contribution to social theory. The life of Emanuel Wallerstein. Wallerstein was born September 1930 in New York City. He was born to a very politically conscious family. He's actually the son of a Jewish doctor, so he was raised in a pretty affluent household, and his parents spoke about politics all the time. They were very involved with the children and shared many political viewpoints with them. In their household, they actually were very concerned with fascism and Nazism because that was going on during the time frame that he was young. So he grew up with a very, very politically conscious lifestyle. And that actually developed even more when he was in high school, and he actually began to formulate his own theories. So his interest in political affairs began at a very, very young age, and Emanuel Wallerstein decided that this is something he wanted to do with his life, and he pursued this on his own. He eventually attended Columbia University during the 1950s, and I say the 1950s because he actually earned 3 degrees while he was attending Columbia. So he got his bachelor's degree, his master's degree, and a PhD all at Columbia over the course of the 1950s. During that, he took a short stint away and served in the United States Army and actually gained an outlook on the rest of the world that helped contribute to his theories that he would develop as he went along. When he returned back to the United States, McCarthyism had taken over the United States, in his opinion. And so he actually wrote his master's thesis on the role of McCarthyism in the United States because he thought it was a byproduct of our political culture. And that thesis on McCarthyism was actually very well received and was part of what made Wallerstein realize his role as a social theorist and actually begin to pursue that more aggressively. Also, while he was at Columbia, he met and married Beatrice, which he had 1 daughter with. Upon his graduation from Columbia, Wallerstein actually was given a position as an instructor, and he worked there and eventually making his way up to professor, and he stayed there until 1971. At that point, he accepted a professorship at McGill University. Again, he was there for quite a bit of time until 1976. He became a professor at Binghamton University, and he was there until 1999. From that point onward, he actually became the head of the Fernand Braudel Center, and he stayed there until his retirement in 2005. Wallerstein currently serves as a senior research scholar at Yale University, and he is making contributions to political theory and social theory to this day. Some of his life experiences that helped shape his theory were he actually became the president of the African Studies Association in 1973. This may seem a bit odd that it was African studies, but Wallerstein developed a penchant for African studies when he went on these cultural studies to Africa and spent some time there, and he witnessed some of the struggles that were going on for freedom there among its peoples, and he brought this back home with him, and this kind of aligned with his way of thinking and his worldview. He developed a really strong interest in African studies, along with Indian studies, but mostly African, and this is how he ended up the president of the African Studies Association. He actually aligned his thinking with a more broad outlook than just what we saw in America for most of his early material. Also during his time, He received honorary and visiting professor titles at many universities around the world. I know that he was in China, um, several other countries, and he was conferred multiple degrees at these universities as well for his scholarship. Wallerstein also served as the president of the International Sociological Association from 1994 to 1998 and chairperson of the Gulbenkian Commission on the Restructuring of the Social Sciences. These are all important roles that he held and helped him learn more about how he viewed the world and helped shape his social theory. So some of Wallerstein's most important works and contributions to social theory can be seen here. One of his more important ones was written in 1979, and it was called The Capitalist World Economy. This was a collection of essays written by Wallerstein that really focused on two primary conflicts in capitalism that he saw. These conflicts were between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, and also between the core and the periphery, which was developed out of his modern world system theory, which we will cover momentarily. Geopolitics and Geoculture, Essays on the Changing World System, was written in 1991. This was Wallerstein's perspective on the events of the time, such as the collapse of the Iron Curtain and the decline in the U.S. as their role as a world power. Then in 1996, another important work of Wallerstein's was The Historical Capitalism with Capitalist Civilization. This synopsis will give you an idea of what this book is about. If you look at the picture, it shows the larger fish eating the smaller fish. This was kind of a take on his impression of capitalism and how the larger, more powerful countries would take from the smaller, poorer, less powerful countries. 1999 saw his work, The End of the World as We Know It, Social Science for the 21st Century. This was basically a state of the world address given by Wallerstein. It represented what he saw as a shift in the thought of current events. This book shared with readers kind of where Wallerstein saw we were headed and where capitalism was headed, and just that shift in thinking. 2000 saw the writing of The Essential Wallerstein, which was one of his more infamous works. It's a collection of his essays, and it's a very important piece of literature and social theory. And then 2003 was The Decline of American Power, which really the title sums it up in that Wallerstein saw that American power was declining specifically after the Vietnam War. He even considers that the terrorist attacks of September 2011 kind of have helped speed along that process and have made it even more undeniable. And this is not necessarily a popular viewpoint of his, but it is a viewpoint nonetheless that he thinks the United States is in a virtual decline. So that brings us to the modern world system, which is Wallerstein's pinnacle of his career. This was the most important contribution that he made to social theory. There have actually been 4 volumes of this written, with the first one being written in 1974. So the modern world system view of Wallerstein's, one of his major points was that social science must be both historic and systemic. He really looked at the historical aspects of what led up to capitalism and how we ended up where we are today. He provided a historical perspective starting from the colonization of the Americas all the way up until the gradual decline of the United States as he sees it. So the modern world system theory is important because it allowed Wallerstein and other theorists to break apart complex issues but still see them as part of a bigger whole. So Wallerstein's theory is that everything is part of a larger picture, that all the nation states in the world are connected. And so you can break apart these issues and study them, but you have to still consider them in the perspective of the whole world system. And he also identified that there were 5 cleavages that exist. And he focused on studying these cleavages because he thought that we needed to learn how they relate to one another, how they behave apart as well, but mostly how they relate to one another since they are all within the world system and they all affect one another. But the 5 that he identified as the most important were race, nation, class, ethnicity, and gender. So as I was saying before, the actions of individual societies or nation states must be considered with reference to the whole system. Wallerstein sort of played on Marx's theory of capitalism, with there being the more powerful prey upon the weak, that they exploit them and use them for their labor and their resources. And Wallerstein sort of took this theory and has expanded it to the entire world as a whole system. So he has identified that there are 3 types of social systems in the world: mini systems, world empires, and world economies. So the mini systems are small and they're self-contained homogeneous societies. So these are what you see with tribes and small islands and small nation states. The people are very similar. They have their own government or lack of government. They really don't interact with outsiders. They're very self-contained. Then you have your world economies, which are your bigger, more powerful countries, but that specifically extract goods and services from the outlying districts. So they have products of their own, but they are known for extracting goods and services from other countries that are not as powerful as they are. And then finally, you have the world empire economic systems, who also extract goods and services from the outlying districts. But the major difference here is they have a political ruler who directly benefits. And this is why it's a world empire, because they typically have a ruling head that runs everything and directly benefits from what their people are doing. It is for them. So in Wallerstein's world system theory model, it's important to note that he believed there was one world market with a global division of labor. So within this economic system, there are 3 areas that Wallerstein identified. So they were your core states, your semi-peripheral areas, and then what he considered the peripheral areas or the periphery. Your core states are your wealthier nation states. So these are capitalistic states that exploit labor and materials from the poorer peripheral areas. So you think countries like the United States that are using labor and materials from smaller, less powerful countries that don't necessarily have the ability to use their labor and their resources properly. And so these core states are taking from it and then they're using it. And then you have the semi-peripheral areas, which are the ones kind of in the middle that exhibit characteristics of both. So they take on some of the characteristics of the core state in that they are exploiting the less powerful states. They're still being exploited themselves by the countries that are the most powerful. So again, this borrowed heavily from Marxist ideas and then expounded it to a more worldwide view instead of just basing it on individualistic behavior. It is based on nation, state, and societal behavior. So now we begin a reflection on Wallerstein's world system approach. Immanuel Wallerstein has a lasting legacy in our world. As I said before, he is one of the most important social theorists in our time, and he is still contributing to this day despite his progressing age. So Wallerstein gave us new ways to view the historical processes that led to our current capitalistic system. When one goes and reads his theories on the modern world system, you will see a timeline of events, beginning with the colonization of the Americas, and then the European dominance, and then you go through the world wars, and then the American dominance, and then now the decline of the American superpower as he sees it. So, and Wallerstein essentially believed that we do not live in a vacuum, that our actions do not exist solely within a vacuum and do not affect anyone but ourselves, but we are part of a larger interconnected system. So the actions of one will always have economic and political ramifications on others, that they are connected. And this very much puts you in mind of globalization, but keeping in mind that his initial volume of this work was written before that term came about. But from the perspective of globalization that we see now, we can really see how what we do has economic and political ramifications for others. Wallerstein really was able to see this early on and put this thought process into his work and show us that we do not live in a vacuum, that we are interconnected. So this is the reason that Wallerstein is one of the most revered social theorists of our time. He actually received the 2003 Career of Distinguished Scholarship Award from the American Sociological Association. This was a major accomplishment and really shows how revered his work is and his legacy that he has left behind. So, and he continues to this day to provide commentaries on current political issues through the Fernand Braudel Center. He actually contributes twice monthly syndicated commentaries. So Wallerstein is very much still involved in political and current affairs. And I have read that there will actually be another volume for his world systems theory that should be coming out at some point in the near future. So there are several criticisms of the world systems model. So some of the criticisms that I have read about are that it sometimes seems to focus too much on the economic aspects alone and does not necessarily consider societal or cultural aspects and how they contribute to what Wallerstein was seeing happen among these states. Another question was, does Wallerstein focus too much on capitalism without considering alternative explanations? Again, this goes back to, does he not put enough consideration into cultural and societal issues and instead focus too much on capitalism? A criticism that was very common in Marxism as well. Does capitalism cause dependency on the core, or did capitalism form around a dependency that was already in existence? Basically, what this means is, from Wallerstein's standpoint, capitalism contributes to a dependency. The weaker, poorer countries are dependent on the core states to provide jobs and to provide money into the economy, because they're capitalistic states and they are exploiting the labor and resources from these poorer states. But is it really exploitation and it was capitalism that caused this dependency? Or was the dependency already there because these states do not have as many resources as they need, or do they have the resources but don't have the means to turn them into items that they can use? For example, technology. Many of the poor states, even if they have the resources to make the technology, they don't necessarily have the labor or the education or what they need in place to take these resources and create something bigger from it. And then another important question is, would poor countries be worse off without the products they receive from capitalism? If they have these resources but don't have the means to turn them into the items that they need, then capitalism actually fills a void for them. So is capitalism contributing to their poverty? Is it contributing to their dependency? Or are these problems endemic to them and already a part of their society, and capitalism has formed around it to help make up for these deficiencies. So these are some of the criticisms of the world system model, because it places so much emphasis on capitalism and the negatives that come from capitalism, when it could be the other way around. It's sort of a what came first, the chicken or the egg type of question. So, in conclusion, while there may be criticisms of Wallerstein's world systems model, there are many positives that come from it. And that can be seen by the fact that Wallerstein has very detailed examples of how he has divided the world into your core and your periphery and your semi-peripheral areas, and you have your world economies and your world empires. These are all really good examples, and he is able to show us how he has seen these and how they work within the world. So these are not things that he's just coming up with. He actually has real world examples of them. So, and then Wallerstein has became a preeminent social theorist for these reasons. I mean, his many books on capitalism are well received and well revered, and he still contributes on a regular basis through this center that he works for. So Wallerstein has made a name for himself in social theory. So despite any criticisms that you may be able to find in his work, he still has made major progress and major headway in social theory and creating this world systems view that has become so popular, and all social science students are learning about it. So in this way, Immanuel Wallerstein is one of our more preeminent social theorists, and any student of social sciences or the world economy, or anyone who just wants to learn more about how the world works, should read Wallerstein's works, for they are very important and they provide us with a meaningful insight into the world economy and how we all interact together and how our actions affect others. And I thank you for joining me tonight. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, and I appreciate your time.